Hi, I'm David Crawford. I work for Corrective in Germany, and we're going to be talking about MH17 and the downing of MH17 and some of the tools that we used to investigate this topic. And so let's get started. You had the US government, which was making a lot of comments but basically wasn't providing any information to back it up. You had the Russian government that was putting information out, the Ukrainians were putting information out, NATO was putting information out, German government was putting information out, everybody, the separatists, everybody had something to say and were accusing other people. And we thought that one thing that we might be able to do in the public interest was to look at the facts. Look at what people were saying and try and basically just to fact check the different things that people were saying and doing. And so that's how we began. And that's how we then came to the question, is it worth investigating? We decided, yeah, it is worth investigating since we thought that it would be helpful to have a base of facts. When do we do an investigation? We do something when we have something new to say, when what we say is important, and when the story requires intensive research. If you can do a good, well-researched story based on 2 phone calls, then you should do it based on the 2 phone calls, because why spend 2 weeks or 2 months investigating something that can be clarified quickly? But we thought this wasn't a case that could be clarified with 2 phone calls. And so we thought that we will investigate. We did not know if we were going to get a story. And I think one of the things that makes us different from the mainstream newspapers are that we didn't know if we would get a story. We didn't know if in the end we would have something new to say. But we were going to try to do that we weren't willing to go out to eastern Ukraine and get photos taken of ourselves with teddy bears that were lying on the ground. We thought it was important to actually try to do value-added research. Now, of course, for most media organizations, you're told, go to eastern Ukraine, come back with a story. You're flying out on Tuesday, we want you back here on Thursday at the latest. You only have time to grab those teddy bears, get a shot, make a statement in the camera, and leave. We wanted to take more time to actually do a value-added story. Our investigative goals are pretty simple. We want to know everything, and we want the files. We go after getting as many files as we can. We want to know what everybody's saying, and we want to see where they're getting the arguments to back things up. We wanted to find the Dutch investigation reports. We wanted the satellite images of the area. We began trying to get additional satellite imagery. We had a budget for buying satellite imagery if we thought that we needed it. So we were looking for as much information as we could get. We wanted photos, we wanted art, we wanted animation, which of course we had to create ourselves to try and put the story together. And we also wanted to find a way to tell a complicated story so that people wouldn't start yawning. And that basically what you're doing, I think Corrective had 7 million people who downloaded the story to read in the first week after it went up. Der Spiegel had another 9 million. And if you're telling millions of people, let's spend the next 30 minutes together, then you have to try and figure out a way to get them to actually listen to the story. And so it helps to have a good yarn. And we wanted basically to package it in a way that people would be willing to spend those 30 minutes with us, which we thought we needed to tell the story. When you're doing these kind of stories, you have to be really, really confident. I get a little bit of stage fright when I'm doing a lot of these things. You know that you're going to be talking to people who think they're very important, to people who maybe don't have time for you. I mean, for years I was a freelance journalist, and I would dial a number and then hang up before the last digit was dialed and then dial it again and wait. And finally, at some point, you have to just take a deep breath and call these people and talk to the people. And so basically, journalism sometimes is a little bit like acting. You just have to say, I belong here, I should be doing it, and you just have to do it. And you have to say to the people, I have the right to look at this stuff. You should tell me what you know, and I have a right to look at these documents, that there's people who need to know this. I'm a vehicle for presenting that information. And so you have to convey people, you have to get them to believe that you actually can do this story. And the best way you can do that is by presenting yourself as somebody who thinks they have the right to be there. We don't beg for access to things, we force it. We create strategies for getting documents. At the moment, we're in a lawsuit with the German Foreign Ministry demanding additional documents, because we know the German Foreign Ministry knew that Eastern Ukraine was a battle zone. They knew that there were ground-to-air missile systems there capable of shooting down airplanes. They knew that there were tanks there, and that these type of tanks are always accompanied by anti-aircraft systems. And they should have warned people and said, hey, wait a second, this is a war zone, plane shouldn't go over there. We talked to the airlines, they said, oh, we had no idea it was dangerous. Whether you believe that or not. But anyway, we put the German Foreign Ministry, we want access to the reports that you filed on that, because you say you didn't know, well, we want you to prove it. So we go after them and look for the information. I think we'll probably get those reports before they're given to us, but we're also going the regular legal way, because that's one of the things that Corrective does, is we insist on getting stuff and we're willing to go to court to get it. You have to know where to look. As I said before, you have to divine a strategy for getting stuff, and every project is different. And the steps to doing it is, first you have to get the easy information. This is stuff that's available in the internet. This could be books that have been published. One of the first things I went after was the Russian social media. That most of the Russian soldiers that are active in Eastern Ukraine, they're all on the Russian version of Facebook, VK or VKontakte. And so I found those. I found the relative units, things. In fact, the main unit that we think is a suspect in the case, that we think their officers did it, that has a Facebook page, or a VK page, so to speak. And so I downloaded everything on there, and I downloaded the profiles and all the pictures and friends lists of everybody who was on there. And so we collected gigabytes of data right away in the first day or two after we realized that this stuff was available. We have technical assistants and staff people, computer hackers who work for Corrective, and one of them said, David, we can do this faster. And he said, just leave it to me, what do you want? And he wrote a script. He had it all very, very quickly. And we then had one of our people export all of this into a database so that we could search and we could find the cell numbers of these people, of the soldiers who worked for this unit, and we could find their email addresses, because we actually wanted to talk to the people. We also analyzed the press conferences. The Russian government, the Russian Ministry of Defense did press conferences, the US Ministry of Defense and State Department and everybody else, even the president's, the White House is doing press conferences. We got all of that stuff and went through it, looking at it. The Ukrainians were putting stuff out, the German government. We went through all of that, looking for it so that we could analyze it and fact check it. One of the best places to get easy information is just to ask your colleagues that if you work for a large organization. For years I worked for the Wall Street Journal. There was always somebody who had done a story close to what you're doing. And so one of the things is just to go to them. You can, if they work for the same publication you do, you can ask them for sources and things like that, and they'll help you. But just, to ask your colleagues, just ask your other sources that you're doing, do you know somebody? Can you, even better, can you call them and tell them that, David Crawford is going to call and, that they should, be willing to get an appointment with you and stuff, but use those networks. Then we began to analyze news stories from other media. I was disappointed by most of the other news stories that I was finding, but there was this one news organization, Bellingcat. Elliot Higgins is going to be here tomorrow. Certainly well worth speaking to him. He and I keep doing telephone ping pong, and sometimes we talk to each other, exchanging emails. We keep wanting to meet for a cup of coffee. We haven't managed yet. I have to fly out this evening. He'll be here tomorrow, so you guys will be able to talk to him where I haven't. But he's done really, really good work. And for me, this was great, and it was a problem at the same time. Great in the sense that we could build off of it. A problem in the sense that, hey, wait a second, I want to do something original. I'm not going to translate Bellingcat. He's done it. Why should I repeat what he did? I want to do value-added journalism. So I began looking through his stuff, and I had to have a strategy. How do we deal with Bellingcat? The first thing we did was we thought we could fact check his stuff. We actually went to the locations that he was writing about, that he was taking images off of satellites and off of social media. We could actually go there. So that was one way we could add value to the story. But for me, Bellingcat was interesting because in the end, I was forced to put them on the same pedestal as the US government. In fact, they were better than the US government. The US government was saying XYZ happened. Bellingcat was saying XYZ happened, or ABC, because they might have been talking about something different, and were putting up their evidence. They were posting it online, whereas the US government wasn't putting up any evidence. The Russians were putting up some evidence, which turned out some of it to be falsified. The Ukrainians were also putting up some stuff that was helpful and some stuff that we thought they would have been better advised not to put up because it just didn't fact check, is in our opinion. I think that they would have been much better advised only to put stuff up that they really, really had absolutely strictly fact-checked and knew that it wasn't going to be cast in doubt. Because if anything is cast in doubt, then virtually everything that you said has been cast in doubt. But Bellingcat, really well done, I'd have to say. And in the end, we put what we thought when we did the stories, we put our stuff, which we thought was new, first, just so everybody would know this wasn't just a Bellingcat story. But then we cited them, praised them for what they were doing, and we did, basically we went through and all of their important stuff that they did, we tried to fact check it, and I think they came out with flying colors as far as we're concerned. But for me it was a problem because we do not copy what other people do. I want to do my own stuff, but sometimes you just have to give people respect for doing a good job. Then you can use other sources. Commercial registries are helpful. Anything that you can get information about people. I do a lot of debt checks and stuff like that. Anytime I want to interview something, the first thing I want to do is get a credit rating on them, and it's fairly easy to do that. And when I got hired at the Wall Street Journal, the first thing I demanded, I said, I'm only going to come here if you set up a thing so I can do credit checks on people. And they said, do we really need this in Berlin? And I said, yeah, that you get the phone numbers of everybody that this guy does business with. I mean, that's, you get his birthday, you get a whole bunch of additional information. Credit checks are really, really powerful tools, and the person you're checking doesn't know you're checking. It gives you you have the names of all of their business partners and stuff like that. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that that you can get. Some of them cost money, but generally it's well worth it if you go and do that. Well, what about secret files? Secret files are sort of, I think the difference between what I do than normal data journalists is I get secret files and digitalize them. Other people get stuff online. I'm not really interested in what's online to a certain extent. I think that's old news, so to speak. I like to get stuff that was never online and then have it digitalized where only I have access to it. And then I go for whole sets of documents. That this was the first 100 binders of stuff related to September 11th, which I did for the Journal a few years ago. Well, a long time ago, 14 years ago. But there we went after everything. We got everything in Germany, we got everything in Spain, we got everything in a whole bunch of different countries. And we digitalized it all so that we could search. And I'm still doing stories based on this stuff. That it's amazing how long you can keep using this stuff. But we've done this with so many different topics. I spent a year doing Siemens, and we had just as much stuff about Siemens and its bribery thing. Basically, anytime I do stories, I go for whole sets of documents and basically, like a vacuum cleaner, collect everything. You have to do good preparation. You have to look for absurd sources. Did a series about money paid to Putin. I realized that his wife had tons of pen pals. And so I went around and was collecting the letters that she had written to her pen pals. And you have to figure out a way to get into the heads of people, and one way is to find out what his wife is saying about him and stuff like that. And if you look, you see there's a story I did in the Wall Street Journal, I think in 2005, where we got into Putin's head this way. So you go after absurd sources that nobody would think of getting, and you make a strategy for getting them, and you go after them. We did that, I've mentioned, with the Russian soldiers. We went after all of their stuff, and we downloaded it as fast as possible. One thing you have to watch out for are the yes people and the no people. Everybody, 90% of the people that you know are no people. A no person is somebody who has the power to stop your story. These are the secretaries of important people, the lawyers of important people, the press officers of almost any company. They're all no people. They probably don't have the power to get you what you really want, but they have the power to tell everybody who works for that company, don't talk to this person. You will be fired for talking to this person. And if there's 3 people who have promised that we will never say what happened, when they start talking to each other, you're going to be in trouble. So what you have to do is, this is what I mentioned before, there's only a few people in the MH17. There was a guy called Rupert Schmidt. He was one of the few yes people. He could actually say something productive. You need to court the yes people and avoid the no people. That don't even let the no people know that you're working on the story. Call the guy on his cell phone, don't go through his secretary. His secretary is probably a no person. She'll tell other people, he'll be afraid to talk to you. Stay away from the no people. And help the yes people help you. Sometimes you can help them by showing them, for example, that you've talked to everybody else that they know. They'll feel more comfortable talking to you. If they realize that you've been doing your homework and have talked to dozens of people. And so part of what we're doing is there's an awful lot of people who I know are not going to speak to me, but I talk to them anyway because the word gets out. This guy is virtually calling up everybody in the board of directors of this company. You've got, in German companies, a lot of times you'll have 30 people in the board of directors. If you call every single one of them, 28 or 29 will tell you nothing, but you have 1 or 2 who will tell you the story, and nobody will know who those 1 or 2 are. Because you talk to everybody. And so that's one way you can protect them. You have to have a strategy so that they feel comfortable talking to you. So you need to help them. Another thing is that files rarely tell the whole story. I showed that thing of boxes a few minutes ago. you can get tons of information, it's all on paper. Is it accurate? You still have to do fact checking, you still have to check things, and you have to figure out a way to tell the story, and usually it involves moving beyond the files and going in a completely different direction with the story. So you need to find other sources, you need to find human sources. Okay, but how do you find human sources? A lot of people say, oh, yeah, well, simple way is just to read newspapers and magazines. That anytime I read a newspaper or magazine, and one of the things that I do when I do these workshops with people where you're basically training them is just giving them newspaper and magazines and say, go through and tell me what the sources are. You can read any, it's a skill you can learn really quickly, probably in an hour or something or less. It's just going through a thing and figuring out what are the sources for the story. Somebody else is going to be doing that for you, like the security people at the company that you're writing about. They're going to be looking at your stories, trying to figure out your sources so they can fire them. But you need to read the competition and see if you can figure out the names of people that you could be talking to. You can look for voluntary sources like NGOs, people who will talk to anybody. Think about who else knows something about this topic and try and figure them out. But you can also look for unwilling partners, and usually those are the best sources, people you force to talk to you. The former CEO of Dresdner Bank hates me because he thinks I tricked him into talking to me about money he was paying to Putin. And we spent more than an hour talking about what he wanted to talk about, how he met the people who were dealing with Putin, how he set up this unit for expanding his business into Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And then we started talking about payments, and then he said, why are we discussing this stuff? You can't be writing about this. And I said, that's why we're here, and he threw me out. But I had 30 pages of notes, and I had basically everything I needed to tell the story from his perspective, and it just made it very believable. And so you have to find a way to get these people to talk, and you just come up with a strategy for it. You brainstorm a little bit, you figure out a strategy, and then you talk to these people. And you get them to tell you stuff before they realize that it's a problem. Or with another German bank, I said to him, look, what you just told me is wrong. You operate in the United States. If you provide false information that's going to be published intentionally, knowing that it'll be published, that's a violation, that's a felony in the US. Are you sure you want to leave that information the way it was? And then he came out with the real information, which ended up being a very big story for us, because you can force people to talk to you, and usually those are the best sources of all. Beware of volunteers, especially other journalists. There's always going to be people who are going to knock on your door or call you and say they want to help. Especially other journalists, they're rarely helpful. Probably want to steal your story. I stay away from them. Volunteers also, some people would call them whistleblowers, can be a problem. You don't know why they're volunteering. You have to do a lot of investigation to figure out, is this guy really a whistleblower? Is he just trying to trick me or something? Huge amount of work. It all needs to be fact-checked. You just can't believe something that somebody walks in your door and tell you. You have to be really aware. How do you gain people's trust? Which is one of the things that you really have to do. One of the things is a no in journalism is really, really difficult to turn into a yes. And you're constantly wanting people to say, yes, I'll give you the files. Yes, I'll do this. So what you need to do is to avoid asking questions that could lead to a no. If you know somebody's going to say, no, I won't do that, then why ask the question? Wait until it comes up in a different format. You need patience. One of the best ways to get an interview with somebody who probably I've gotten interviews with a lot of people who never give interviews, and the way I do it is I send them a letter. Email is not a letter. Email, it's very easy to send back a reply saying, sorry, no time. You send them a letter, they're probably not going to reply. That no is not spoken. So there's not a situation that when you call them a week later that they will say, I told you no. Because then it's pride. I said no to you. Don't you have the respect for what I said? It's not personal. There's no things involved. And what happens very often is that letter ends up lying on the coffee table of that person for a week or so, and then they end up calling you a few days later. And you can take unlimited amounts of time before you write the letter. You can do research specifically to prepare this letter, so it says exactly what you think would attract this person. So a letter is one of the most powerful tools in journalism that I say, but you have to actually get out and lick one of these foul-tasting postage stamps and put it on it and send it to the people. Because an email or a phone call, it's too spontaneous. You need to give the people time and really, write a letter that will appeal to the person. And if they're conceited, you can appeal to their conceit. If they're have other pet theories, you can do enough research to figure out about them. You can find out who their friends are, and you can cite their friends or cite this guy's own dissertation or whatever. Write a letter. If the guy is hard to reach, just send them a letter. But again, you need patience. Email, boom, it's there. A letter, it takes a couple of days, and then it will take even a few days longer before you get a reaction. Though my experience is they generally call you 2 or 3 days later. Discussed this, also another thing is you never ask a question if you can get the answer easily someplace else. That you're only going to have limited time at an interview. Do your preparations so that you basically know everything, especially investigations have to be done from the outside to the inside. You can't start off by going to the main people, the main criminals, if they are criminals, at the center of an investigation and saying, did you kill this person? You have to start at the outside and you talk first to the people who don't know a lot, but they'll tell you everything they know, and basically you're educating yourself going into the center of the story so that when you speak to the core people who you're only going to have maybe 5 minutes with before they throw you out, so that you are asking the right question when you get there. So don't ask easy questions that terrify people and they throw you out. Or you wait 70 minutes like I did with this banker, and then he threw me out, but I had my notebook full. Never offer protection. Never say to a whistleblower, I will protect you. All you're going to do is terrify them. If you think they need protection, then definitely protect them, but don't offer it. You never make promises of these things. Just protect the person. I had one story that I did, and my boss said, well, what promises did you make? I said, I didn't promise anything. He said, well, then we can publish his name. It would be great. We can put his name everywhere around. And I said, no, he is not going to be mentioned. He said, why not? And I said, because I know the guy, I spent so much time with him, he'll commit suicide if we put his name in the story. And there's no story that's worth that. So I never promised him anything. I never mentioned that he even existed in the story. And to this day, nobody knows that he was working with me on it. He himself, afterwards, we went out to dinner and had a talk, and he's proud of this story. But he was never mentioned simply because I didn't think he was capable of judging whether he was endangered or not. And I just thought it's something I have to do for him. And I certainly don't want to scare the dickens out of him. I will protect him without telling him. Sometimes people will come to you and say, I want you to do X, Y, Z to protect me or something. Usually, I think it's hogwash that the people are just paranoid. But then you do have to decide, do you need that? Generally, the best decision is probably, I'm just not going to work with this source. I'll find somebody who's not frightened. Because most people who are frightened, probably, most of them don't really know very much. That a lot of people think that their access to information is a lot more powerful than it is. Plan your interviews. One thing I've noticed that you almost always have to meet with key people 3 times. I don't know what's magical about the number 3, but to me, and there are some people who give you everything on the first meeting and they'll never meet with you again. But generally, I think it's best to plan 3 meetings. And a lot of times I'll do 1 meeting, then I'll plan to go to the next town or the next city the next day, do something, and then I'm back again the day after that. And then I meet with them. So I might meet with them on a Monday, on a Wednesday, and then I meet with them on Thursday morning before I go, just to get those 3 meetings in. I think that if you meet with somebody on 3 different occasions, it really, really helps with trust. And for that reason, my personal thing, I try to plan with the people I think are really going to be important. I plan 3 meetings with them. Okay, you also have to plan where you want to go and how you're going to go. For East Ukraine, it was a war zone, and we had to figure out a strategy for going there. We realized that there were going to be 2 elections at the end of October and start of November, one in Kiev in the rest of Ukraine and one in the separatist area. And they were a week apart. And so we planned our main time to be just before the election in Kiev and going to just after the elections in separatist area. And there wasn't much fighting going on there because of the 2 elections, that both sides more or less wanted journalists traveling around. And so we thought that would be the best window for going in and getting out without any trouble, and it turned out to be the right decision. I actually wasn't the one who went there. That was my colleague, Marcus Benzman, who did. He's also speaks Russian much better than I do. He's married to he speaks Russian at home. And he basically, you can't do these kind of investigations with a translator. And so he went there and did it, and hats off to him. He did a really great job. But this project, it was basically Marcus and we did this whole thing together, but he was the one who actually went to East Ukraine and did those interviews, and really well. You asked the hard questions last. I was talking about that before. Fill your notebook first. If you think you're going to get thrown out, why ask it first? Just ask questions you know the person is going to answer. Any of that stuff, that if you can fit it into the story, it makes it much more believable if people know you actually took the time to talk to these people. Every time you interview somebody, ask them to suggest news sources. And even better, ask them to call that person and say, hey, David Crawford's going to contact you, or to send that person should send an email to you and that person at the same time saying, you guys should meet and stuff. Use your sources, the network, of the sources that you have to get you to the next person. You'd look for exclusive information without any strings attached. I talked about not making promises. Don't promise. Don't give anybody a veto over what you're going to do with a story. A lot of people say, I'll talk to you, but you have to do this, that, or the other thing. Say no. Just don't make any promises. You are in charge of the story. And if somebody, I had one, the head of communications at a big German film company once called me. And the first thing he said was, yeah, everything I say here is off the record and you won't write about anything that we're discussing. And I said, wait a second, you called me? I think we need to just end this conversation right now. I know everything anyway. I will be sending you questions in a couple weeks when I'm ready, but I see no reason to make any promises. He actually then ended up telling me everything anyway. That I wanted to hear. I didn't believe everything that he was saying, but he, ended up saying what he would have said anyway. He wanted to talk to me, and he was terrified of the story. But there's no reason to give them promises. Don't promise, just say, I'll be sending you questions later or something. Don't give anybody a veto over your story, especially if you've done any work on it. What I demand of sources is, first of all, a lot of time. That, you know, I end up, with some sources, I end up spending weeks or months where we're talking almost every day. I insist that they give me reliable answers to every question, and I want every document they have on the topic. They will hate me sometimes for it or think they do, but in the end, basically, you want to cooperate with me, this is what you have to do. And you know, the time is really the most important thing, because you need the cell phone numbers of the people, because you're going to start to panic the night before your story goes to press, and you're going to want to fact check everything, and is this name spelled properly and stuff like that. So you have to be sure that they're willing to take the time so that you can get them when you need to get them. Yeah, the responsibility of a journalist is, for some people, is really like driving a fast car towards a wall at high speed. And your sources are the passengers. That, you know, it's your foot on the brake, you're steering, and they basically are at risk, and they just basically have to trust that you're not going to hurt them. But that's what it comes down to sometimes, is that you basically have to convince them that it's still worthwhile to participate. One thing you do is you insist that they're completely open to you. I cannot say to somebody, you tell me every secret you have, but I'm not going to tell you anything about me. So I have to be open with this person. I'm not going to tell them necessarily everything that I'm going to write, but I have to be willing to tell them something about myself. Maybe I'll even take them home and introduce them to my family or something like that. I want them to understand who I am, so that they'll just feel comfortable with me. And you know, I think it's a really thing, is that you have to make this person feel like they're part of a community. And you create a team for 2 weeks, 2 months. We're all working on a story together. They have the feeling that they're participating. And at the end, you know, it's kind of a celebration. The story comes out. You invite the people out to dinner, generally individually, because they don't want other people to know that they're cooperating. But then you end up going out to dinner with people and celebrating a little bit. And so this is, that's the goal that you're communicating, that we're going to have this project and it will be fun. And you know, they want to know what to expect. If you think that, you know, they could be hurt by something, either you make sure that it doesn't happen, or you have to be open with them. The last thing that you want is for people to feel like they've been tricked or something, especially the people who are helpful to you. So you have to be open enough with them so that, because if you're, especially somebody who you're quoting, you want to be sure that if you quote somebody, they're not afterwards going to say, I never said that, because that just makes you look bad. So you basically have to make sure that they know that you're going to be putting these words in their mouth. No secrets. You know, my thing is that I basically tell people, look, everything you know is not secret. You're going to find out everything anyway. And nobody's ever said no to me, so why should you? As I was saying before, what separates the good stories from the bad stories are the unwilling sources. You have to go after those people and force them to talk to you. And don't make concessions that would give somebody else a veto power over your story. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience. You just have to wait. In Germany, when you're working your way from outside to inside, you have to take the people in a certain order. And so you call somebody and you say, can we meet? And they say, sure, let's meet. How about after Easter? You know, and then you look in your calendar, when's Easter? Oh God, it's in 3 weeks. Okay, so you have to wait until then, and then you take the next person. And so sometimes stories can take months. What you need to do then is make sure you don't pitch the story to page 1 where you're working. Don't even tell them about it. These kind of stories you're always doing in your free time, because you're meeting people after 9 in the evening, you're meeting people on Sundays. When I worked for the Wall Street Journal, I had to do 24 stories a year. I would always end up doing 30 to 35 stories a year. the stories I really cared about were 4 or 5 of them, maybe, and I would be pushing these stories because it would take months to do, whereby you were doing these other 24 stories anyway along the way. And I realized at some point or another, the stories I'm proud of are really a hobby, because I was fulfilling my contract to the Wall Street Journal by writing the stupid stories that had to be published on this day because somebody was arrested or some breaking news was happening. So you have to have the patience with the stories that you care about. You end up doing them in your free time. If somebody won't talk to you, just wait until they talk to you. If there's, investigative stories have to be a little bit timeless because it takes a while to do them. So you don't want nobody to care about the story. You have to find the right kind of story that will hold until you're finished. And then don't tell page 1 that you're working on a story if you don't think it's finished. Just hold it, keep doing the research, keep waiting for that final person to come. I've waited sometimes 6 months for somebody to talk to me who is the core person, and then finally you have a strategy. A lot of times you get these people at conferences or at different events that they have to talk to you, or that that they're going to be there, and then you are physically there and you just walk up to them at a conference and you're standing at the same coffee table with them and you can put your questions to them or something. It's very difficult for people to hide if you're patient. You'll always figure a time and place that you can talk to people. Wait them out. How reliable are sources? That's something you really need to check. Compare what they say with the information that's in document and the information you're getting from other sources. Is the person willing to answer all the questions completely? That's a pretty good sign. If people are very hesitant to say things and stuff, then, and what they're saying doesn't check out, then you should be dubious. But and keep looking for news sources. Every time you do an interview, you ask them, who else could I talk to, and check with those people. Do they say the same thing? Finally, you fact check everything, including your own pet theories. And with the stories, I always start off with pet theories. A lot of them turn out to be wrong, and they get chunked because you realize could have been, but it's not. And so you have to fact check even your own assumptions. And anyway, that's the basic thing, and happy to take questions. And sorry for taking you off the topic of MH17. I'm happy to answer any questions closer to that topic too.